Okay, we are on to our discussion, our introduction to data analysis. So we started off reading chapter 8, which gives an overview and an introduction to qualitative data analysis. Now, we do have 2 more class periods and lectures about this, going more into depth, giving you more information about it, but this is our introduction and our overview. So in the next part of the perusal, I went ahead and uploaded chapter 8. So after you finish reading chapter 8, you can go in there and share your main takeaways that you got out of this chapter. And any questions that you have for me or things that you wanted to call out for the group, you can put there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the big ideas, things that I thought were important to reiterate. So talked about these 5 phases, organizing the data. So with this, thinking about collecting data, even when you're collecting data, that is part of the analytic process. So thinking about your analytic memos, those memos that you make right when you collect the data are so important. So thinking about how you'll keep that organized, and then thinking about how you will organize your transcripts, your observation notes, maybe creating case files based on date or based on participant. So go ahead and start thinking about some ways that you could do this. Of course, it's flexible, and qualitative researchers are always adaptive and trying new strategies. One tip that I have is, I think it's more expensive now, but I have had great luck using the transcription site Otter AI. Now, it used to be that beginning researchers were expected to transcribe their own data. And I do think it's very important to listen to recordings back. But it's pretty accepted now that you can use a transcription service, and there's so many now that are free. But it is important that you see transcribing as actually part of the analytic process, even if you are using assistants to do it. And then understanding that transcription is not necessarily fact. There's different ways to do it. The text talks a lot about even considerations such as transcribing, and then also translating if you have participants that are speaking in multiple languages, or you speak in multiple languages, just being very transparent about your approach to that. Now, step 2, immersion in the data. So I recommended listening to it again, rereading, trying different organizational strategies, maybe color coding, memoing. Some researchers like to print it out and have it all around them, listen while they're driving to the recordings. So making sure that you understand that that is a big part of it, is spending time immersing yourself in the data. Generating case summaries. So the text talks about data reduction being an element in each phase of data analysis. So you might create categories, and so you sort your data based on those categories. You might create case files and describe based on maybe school, maybe based on participant, date, lesson. So many different ways to do that. You might do narratives, and have some way to summarize or generate. Up next is coding the data. Now, we are going to do some readings in the next 2 sessions. Coding is not the only approach. Not all qualitative analysis involves coding. It's become very common, but you don't have to use coding. So, but you do need to use a method. So if you don't use coding, you can choose one of the ones that I share in the following lectures, or another one that you find. So this is when you have your case studies and you go back through. It's iterative, the theme that we've been going through the whole time, and you are focusing in on specific thoughts that you have or words. There's so many different coding methods. And we are going to get into that in the coming lectures as well. And then finally, your final phases of data analysis or data interpretation are offering those interpretations through your analytic memos. Those memos are so important. We've been memoing the entire term. There's different types of memos. But when you are doing your analytic memo, you are focusing in on different components. Maybe it is, like they mentioned, methodological, what you need to adjust for next time, theoretical, thinking about how it connects to everything that you would put into your literature review and your theoretical framework. Thematic, how does it relate to the emerging findings that you are noticing? So this is part of what you are doing throughout. Okay, so here are some, this is from our recommended text, the Ravage text, and this is some prompts. These are some prompts that you can use to help you start to think about what you can how you can make sense of the data. So you can see here, these are some prompts too that you can use for analytic memos. So here are some prompts you could use to write emerging learnings or findings, questions that are coming up for you, like reflexivity, how you were reacting to the participant, ideas, thoughts about potential codes. Maybe after conducting an interview, you got an idea for 2 codes, go ahead and jot down a memo. So this is something that you can come back to when you are analyzing, or you can add some of these questions to your prospectus about how you plan to engage in memoing as an analytic strategy, and give some examples of the types of memos that you plan to write as you analyze or interpret your data. So here is a visual. Now, this is based on the classic grounded theory, and for many beginning researchers, many new to qualitative researchers, many experienced qualitative researchers, they are most familiar with grounded theory methods of analysis. Now, most people do not use grounded theory as their qualitative genre, and for our purposes, no one is. However, you can still use grounded theory methods. So this goes back to our discussion that methodology is separate from methods. And so even if your methodology is not grounded theory, you can draw from grounded theory methods. Now, keep in mind, grounded theory comes from a more traditional approach. And there are iterations that are more critical, more constructivist, but where the approach came from is trying to almost be, I don't want to say compete, but it was definitely influenced by the quantitative paradigm in terms of being very structured and demonstrating rigor by following it's kind of like a top down for a bottom up approach. So it is very prescriptive in a way, but there might be some things here that you want to draw from. So just make sure if you are drawing from this, that you are clear that you are using grounded theory analytic methods, just to clarify which ones you're using and how you are using it. So here you can see the class. Here you can see, and you may be familiar with these terms, in vivo codes, process codes. Well, these are some different types of codes that you might see. So in vivo is when you use the exact words from the participant, and then initial codes, these other types of codes, you can find more detail about them in Saldanha's book or in the grounded theory Glasser text going through those. So you start off with your initial codes, your open coding that you do first. So these are the types of codes that you will do in first round coding, your open codes, line by line, going each line of the transcript and assigning each line a code from one of these. Then you engage in your analytic memo writing. And as you can see, data collection, coding, and memo writing happens simultaneously. So within the grounded theory analytic approach, you are analyzing the data as soon as it's collected, instead of waiting until all data is collected and then going back and analyzing all of it. So that is maybe what you've heard of as the constant comparative approach, because you are constantly analyzing and collecting, because the goal in grounded theory is to build this theory. So there's all these components related to theory saturation. And so that's why the data collection process is ongoing within this first round process. Now, after data saturation is reached, and that, they have certain guidelines for how and I know that we read a little bit about that as well. Then you engage in the axial coding, where you are finding clusters. And then you have your emergent categories, and then you can see how throughout this process, you are able to identify those core categories and then your theory that comes out of it. Now, so you might use some of these approaches, you might use, for instance, in vivo coding. You might go through a 3-stage process where you start with in vivo coding or open coding, and then axial coding, and then go to your pattern codes. So you might draw from this, but this is the traditional way, just so you can get a sense of how grounded theory goes from this line by line open coding to their findings. Okay, so we talked about initial coding. Open coding is what you will do first in vivo. There's so many different types, and we will read more about those in our next lecture in Saldana's book. So talked about making sure that when we talked about a thematic memo. So some of your codes can come from your theoretical framework, from your conceptual framework, from the literature that you have done. So as you are reading through the transcripts and assigning codes, it might come from theory. Now, in vivo is when it comes directly from the words. So if you have a chunk of text or a line of text, you would take a couple words directly from what the participant said and make that the code. And so start to think about what type of approach to research on the continuum that would reflect. If you are really concerned with keeping participants' words verbatim, you might be more so on the observer side, the mining side, as opposed to socially constructed, where you're applying your own interpretation. And so there are sites for these and descriptions, so refer to Saldana's book for these. Here is another visual of how you would go from transcript to theme. So data, this is like your transcript. As you can see, this one's not line by line. It looks like every second or third line, they assigned a code. Now, once they had the code, and even this code had some subcodes, they were able to collapse or merge the codes into categories. And our text talked about the difference between categories and themes. And then within those categories, you can cluster those together to create your themes. And then you would discuss those and use the rich descriptions from the data to discuss those themes and concepts, and could even be advanced as a theory. Okay, so these are ideas for your analytic memos. So elements of the analytic categories. So it could be about the phenomenon that you're studying, the causal conditions that you're noticing, the context, intervening conditions, action strategies that you might take, and consequences that you could that you are noticing. And here are some prompts that you could use for analytic memos as you are engaging in interpreting the data. I love meta memo. Okay, so we are going to, so you already have chapter 8 in the next section. Did I am I in the wrong place? So we have chapter 8 in the next section, and then we also have the articles that you read. Okay, so you already left your reactions to chapter 8. And so now in the second part of perusal, you have the articles. You are to choose one of these articles. So there's a phenomenology, this one, and two phenomenologies, a critical race perspective here using counter narrative, another counter narrative, and this one, I need to double check. I think I picked it because it's mixed methods. So choose one of these articles, and as you read, really focus in on their data analysis. And you can leave your reaction to their data analysis. So some ideas of how you might discuss it. How do the authors discuss analysis? What are their assumptions that they're making? Again, think about that qualitative continuum. What processes do they use in data analysis? Any questions that you have about how they did this? Yes, okay, so you can read these and then discuss your reaction to their data analysis. Now, you'll definitely find in published research that the data analysis section is a common weakness. Sometimes researchers are not as transparent as they should be about their data analysis process, so that might be something that you note as well. And you can also make connections to articles that you've read for your bibliographic library about their data analysis. If there's anything useful that you wanted to share with other classmates, you can also leave a note about that. Okay, and then lastly, after you have finished your article, you are going to memo based on what you know so far. Of course, we still have 2 more lectures, so this is not definitive. This is just a picture of where you are right now with data analysis. So thinking about how you will interpret the data that you will collect. So your current understanding of data analysis. And again, this is just the introduction. So thinking about the primary methods of data analysis that you might use based on what you read in chapter 8 and based on the articles that you have been reading. And then how you might organize your data. Maybe you have an idea from the chapter, keep it fresh, memo about it so you can remember it once it is time for you to do that. And then finally, what do you need to understand further to continue crafting your analysis? This is to help me know what to provide for you, and then just to help you set a goal for yourself for the next couple lectures, just to keep you focused on what you need. So here is a template. Of course, you don't need to use this. You can come up with a totally different memo. If these readings, if this lecture has sparked something else for you, you can write about that. So this is meant for you to just react to what we've been talking about. So here, if you have some ideas about what strategies you're considering using to analyze your data, what are they and why? Systems that you might use to organize your data, reflections, questions, next steps. This is when you can reflect about what you need to know further to be successful. Can't wait to read them. Bye.